As with all things, remove all O-rings on all components. One thing I didn't tell you about was getting the high pressure seat out of the high pressure seat assembly. You have a small pin port in the back that you can use a hardened pin or tool to push the high pressure seat out. I like to use a small wood screw and go directly into the the old face of the old high pressure seat, and just drill in there and pull it out with a pair of pliers. It's a lot easier in my book. If you have any doubts, continue to sit there and look at the parts, exploded parts view, and go on VDH.com for that material. As you can see here, the flathead screw is actually the oscillator stem cover port, and it has an O-ring on it too. You need to remove that O-ring. Anything that's got an O-ring on it, you need to get rid of. So we're going to go ahead and take that oscillator stem cover off and expose the oscillator stem. Now remember, that large brass piece is the actual oscillator. This is the oscillator stem, which acts more like a reserve valve in a way. Once pressed. Now what I'm doing is I'm taking my pick and I'm pushing the oscillator stem back out through the rear of the reg. And you can either use brass, or you can use the piece of plastic or other such tool. Don't use steel or anything, or you might damage it. So it comes on out, and you can see it's got a spring, and it's got a spring pad on it. But remember, in front of that spring pad is another O-ring that you need to be wary of, because like I said, this thing's got a lot of O-rings. You want to make sure that O-ring is taken out, so you're not doubling up on O-rings and messing it up. And of course, you're going to take your centered filter out and replace that as well. Now there's an O-ring underneath that center filter that acts as a shock absorber, and you're going to replace that as well. And all your old O-rings, as soon as you get them and you're done with them, throw them away. You don't want them messing up your project. And there it is, the O-ring that we just took out. Now this reg was in pretty good shape. It had a little bit of oxidation. I didn't see any real hard verdigris so far as I looked into it. So somebody took care of this regulator. And we're going to go into a couple other things here. But inside the first stage piston shaft, there's an O-ring. And I'm pointing out to it. It's down inside there. And it's about 1/8 of an inch in from the water side opening. Next, we're going to remove that O-ring inside where the first stage is, where the piston, it's a piston seal O-ring right inside the body there. And just get yourself a good curved O-ring pick and pull that O-ring out just fine before you start cleaning. That's another little O-ring that you need to watch out for. It's a critical O-ring because it seals up the piston inside the first stage and around the ambient pressure ports, keeps water out of the high pressure seat area. So make sure you get that out. Now we're going to go after the oscillator stem here in a second, and it's also got a little O-ring about the same size down inside there. And we'll show you here in a second. And we're going to go ahead and do a cleaning on that as well. And maybe you might be able to see it. You got to watch out for that stem. And there is a little O-ring down inside there right now. I got to dig it out. Turning it around. Same thing. Make sure there's no garbage or crap in there. Same thing. No O-rings left inside the body. Alright, yeah, we just pulled this little O-ring right there. That little O-ring came right out of there of the oscillator stem. And where a lot of people will screw up is they won't get that little O-ring out. Then they won't do a thorough cleaning and inspection, and they'll leave that O-ring in there and then go ahead and drop another O-ring in there, and your honker doesn't work. Or worse yet, your honker starts honking at 1200 psi instead of about 400. So make sure you get that old O-ring out. Remember, all the O-rings in the kit need to go in the honker. There's no extra parts and pieces. So if you got one O-ring left over, or, you know, then you're like, wait a minute, where'd that little O-ring go? Get rid of all your old O-rings. Get rid of every damn one of them.
Don't have them hanging around messing up your project. What I like to do is, with my regulators, I put them in a vinegar solution to break up any corrosion. And this rag body itself is in pretty good shape, so it'll clean up fairly quickly. Just watch it when you're putting it in there. Go ahead and drop your body in. Drop all your other parts. Some of them are stainless steel, so it's not a problem. Springs, everything. But don't leave them in too long. For instance, the oscillator itself, the honker, okay, you need to make sure that's cleaned quite nicely. But you can throw your springs in. Scubapro makes excellent springs. And, okay, you just let them sit on one side and then you rotate the parts around, or you can elevate them up, make it a deeper solution. And they're soaking wet, move them around a little bit. There we go. And you can see that oscillator is going to shine right up in this vinegar and water solution. I'm using a little bit stronger. It's about 1/3 vinegar, 2/3 water. And here, that's straight white, apple cider vinegar. And we're going to let it sit here for about 20-30 minutes or so, and we're going to check parts, and we're going to go ahead and pull it out and clean them up.
Using an old toothbrush and some warm water. And by the way, we've got warm water. I'm over in Saudi Arabia. That's actually warm water coming in. I'm going to take some bar soap and just give a light scrub to any of the components I can with an old toothbrush. Okay, I'm using this on the oscillator right now. I'm getting into all those cavities where the O-rings will go, and then making sure that there's no crud that is left on there. And you rinse it off with warm water. And you pat dry it, and the warmth that is absorbed will let it dry out. Same thing with the body, same thing with all components. The body especially, if you get in there, you'll see some really nasty crud come out of there, mainly from old O-rings and old lubrication inside either the first stage or even in the oscillation chamber. Try to get in there as best you can, and the areas you can't get at, you're going to go ahead and later on we'll get in there with good old Q-tips and scrub any of the nasties out. And yeah, you start seeing that brush turn black there, especially when you go to some areas. And a lot of that black stuff, it's not just verdigris, it's old O-rings that have decayed. Look at that, nasty, pretty nasty stuff. Yeah, but we're going to continue on that, and make sure you get a good rinse on it. You can also take a scuba tank and blow the body and blow the parts out with some fresh scuba tank air. And there's all your parts the way they should be, lined up on the floor. And I'm letting them dry out now, just piecing them together. Now remember that oscillator stem with its spring and its spring pad, you want to keep those together because they can have a tendency of walking off, and you don't want to lose those. Just go ahead and wipe your parts down as best you can, and we'll get into going ahead and getting some interior stuff now. Now I've got some Q-tips, and of course I'm going to go in and go through anything I can get a Q-tip through, in and around any crevices, all the orifices, all the holes, the oscillator stem chamber, including the ambient pressure ports. People forget that, as well as the nipple connect for your tank, right there where the centered filter is. You need to sit there and just move them around nice and gentle. It takes a little bit. There's no fast way to do this right. And you'll see, yeah, those are pretty nasty there. And that's a second run. But I tend to hit them up really good. And you can see inside there, it's actually pretty clean. Believe it or not, it's got a dark patina, but I think that was a factory finish on there. That's not an oxidation. It's just a nice dark finish, especially in that oscillation chamber. As with all things, if you feel it's not clean enough, go ahead and repeat the process. Just watch out for letting it submerge too long in vinegar solution, and make sure you rinse it well. Make sure you also get any Q-tip pieces out of there. You don't want any cotton in. Also, make sure you clean out your ambient pressure ports and your nipple connect, as well as your screws for your key, your tank key. If you're in doubt at all where something should go ahead and download the complete exploded view of the Mark 7 honker on vintagedoublehost.com's manual section on their webpage at vintagedoublehost.com. Okay, now we've got all of our parts cleaned up, and you're gonna get them all together, try to get them organized and keep them from running around on you. You're gonna have all kinds of different O-rings to put together, but we're gonna walk through it and talk through it. And right now we have we're gonna go ahead and put our high pressure seat back in to the high pressure seat retaining and port access hatch, as you want to call it. And it's real simple. I use a tiny bit of silicone lube in and around the sides to have it slide in easier, so we can go ahead and if we have to pull it out later, it's a lot easier to get out with a pin through the back side, the little pin port on the back. Now, to pull the high pressure seat out on the old one, I just use a screw. Now, this one originally had a flat surface, but some will have concave and flat. Well, I'm going to retain the flat surface on the working side of the regulator in order for it to be in its original configuration. Now I'm going to take a 0.15 diameter O-ring, and it's going to go on the outside of that high pressure seat plug. Now, one of the things I like to do is knock out real quick. I like to get the oscillator stem out of the way. So there's my oscillator stem, and I put a little bit of lubrication on it, just a light coat. Same thing with spring, light coat. Now you can use Cristo lube too if you want, but a light coat of either a silicone lube or Cristo lube. And go ahead and put that together. Get your spring pad back on there. And go ahead and take a 0.08 diameter O-ring and place it, give it a little bit of lube and place it directly over on top of that spring pad. And go ahead and directly insert it into the reg body and get it out of the way. Just makes things a lot easier. Now you're gonna, once you get that set in there and down, okay, you're gonna go ahead and put your oscillator stem cover right there with its support, and it's going to use another 0.08 diameter O-ring, and you're going to go ahead and drop that puppy right on in there and get it out of the way. And you can put a little bit of lubrication around the threads. It actually really helps for maintenance later on to get a little lube on any threaded material, just to stop any possible water contamination, salt contamination, things like that from freezing up your threads. And once you get her on there, set it down good, firm, not too hard, but just, hand tight. Once you do good and hand tight, you're good to go and you're done with the oscillator. Okay, we're going to go ahead and knock out our piston here. And of course, I like to throw just a light coat of lubrication on it. And we're going to use, when we're ready to put the O-ring on in and around to seal up the piston, that's going to be a 0.22 diameter O-ring. Goes on, there it is, the 0.22. And we're going to go ahead and get that on and knock that part out of the way so we can drive on with our rebuild. All right, let's get our oscillator back in the layer of the honker. And we're going to take a 1/17 O-ring. That's the big thick O-ring that's going to go around the outside edge of the oscillator. Now that's a 0.22 that goes on the actual cover port. But yeah, 117 O-ring. Now remember that little tip is actually a spring guide there that for the oscillator spring. But I put some lube in and around the edges where that 117 O-ring is going to go on to seal it up. And we take our 117, there it is, and we go ahead and put it on in and around the oscillator.
We're going to take this number 014 gasket, or excuse me, O-ring, and we're going to seal that back in right there. Just press it on in. Should go right in. That's a buffer. Okay, same thing here. I'm going to add a little bit of lube to the exterior, not too much, just to those threads. And I'm going to drop a dash lube in there, a dash lube on my main spring, my oscillating spring, just enough. And this is more of an anti-corrosive thing. Notice it's not big chunks of lube, it's just enough to give it a little bit of a protective coating. And of course the main seal O-ring, which is a number 022 O-ring, goes back on. Okay, and that's going to seal up that, make that airtight. So let's go into the layer of the I call it the layer of the honker. Okay, we're going to drop our oscillator back in. Notice this portion is up. We've got all of our rings in, and we're going to just drop it right in. Okay, and it's going to, just seat it back in. That's why you put that lube on it. Okay, put your main spring back on. That's what the little nipple's for. And go ahead and take your main access port cover and get that out of the way. And I'm just going to go ahead and rotate it with this for right now. You just get her down out of the way. And we'll tighten her up in a second here. Rotate it on around. And get her nice back into the housing where she belongs. Okay. Make sure it's in there set in good, hand tight. Don't over tighten it.
Let's go ahead and get our piston seal ring back inside the main body now. What I do is I like to sit there and sort of fold it over with a pair of tweezers and stuff it down inside the main body and get it on there. See, it's right rolled up, and that's the way it should look. And here's a better picture there. It's just rolled up inside the main body.
Yeah, once you got your O-ring rolled up in there, you can take the chopstick that you've cut just to block that end off. It needs to be thick enough to block that end off. Or excuse me, if you can, get a hold of a Mark 10, Mark 5, Mark 10 tool, and this will just roll right in there. It makes it really nice. I think it's Scuba.com has these, but you can find them on the internet. And that just seals up that end. Now the reason why I like to use a rolled point pick, you can use a straight pick, but you've already got it in there, and you can go in and you can go ahead and push and pull that O-ring until it slides in. The rolled lip, this rolled piece right there that rolled in, helps ball it up and grab into it. So, and you're going to roll that. There we go. You're going to roll that O-ring right up to the end there. Okay, this way with the either with this chopstick or the scuba tool, you're blocking that O-ring from trying to fall out, and you just pull it up, and it's going to catch that lip of that cutout for the O-ring inside the regulator, and that one's in there now.
Let's explain the Mark 5, Mark 10 beveled edge brass piece. That beveled edge there will fit up right in, snug past the O-ring inside the body of the reg, but you have to sit there and insert it from the high pressure side, high pressure seat side of the regulator, and then just slide it down. It takes a little bit. Got to make sure there's no sharp edges along it.
Just try to jam it in here with jam the piston stem in there as is. The sharp edge, sealing edge of the piston stem could cut that O-ring that you laboriously put back in there. So you can use this out of the Mark 10 tool. There are bullets available. I made this one, and you saw earlier in the video, in the first video, where I've made my own scuba bullet out of a piece of chopstick. Chopsticks are pretty handy. And what I do, and I'm going to go ahead and put this piston back in. What I do is I take a little bit of, after I've cut it down and I made sure that it's nice and smooth, that I don't have any sharp edges on it, as I push down. I shouldn't feel any sharpness there, and I don't.
I take a little bit of lubrication again, and I just lube the top of that so it slides right on through, lube right there. I drop my return spring back on, and I go ahead and I put my piston back in, ensuring I've got some lube in and around my main seal around the piston. And in case you're wondering what these cutouts are for, those are balancing cutouts. And in this one part here, it's actually, even though it's an end connector, it's also a balancing block. So you get total airflow in and around the piston, in case anybody's wondering. On earlier Scubapro models, you won't see that because they were not balanced. So we're going to go ahead and put this one back in. Got our spring on. And I want to just go ahead and rock her back in there. I got my little chopstick. Got to find the hole first. That's the other point about it, finding that hole. Okay, and there, got the hole, and I'm just gonna push that on through there. And when you're done, just go ahead and pull it out and finish off in the back and seal that puppy up. Just get it locked in there so it doesn't come back out. And now you're set to go ahead and put your high pressure seat on. Okay, got our high pressure seat. We're going to go ahead and put that on. Remember, you've got that sealing O-ring. If you haven't already done so, go ahead and put it in there. I think it's a 015, I believe, but I'll check. And go ahead and get the same thing. A little bit of lube goes a long way for maintenance. A little bit of lubrication, and roll that high pressure seat on in. Get it started, get it in, and you're good to hook. And I'll use my little tool. Now this is a different one, different tool. It's still a Scubapro tool. Go ahead and but it's this one's a little bit easier to work with than the other one, so I swapped out. And come on, get in there, get in there. There we go. Yeah, look at that, a lot easier. Nice and firm. Can double check. Layer of the honker, everything's firm. Go back over and go ahead and roll in your piston and balance chain, balancing block, and just take her on in. Yeah, this tool works a lot nicer than the other one. The other one's sort of a general purpose tool. This one's a little bit more specific, excuse me, and then you get that spring pressure, start moving, and all the way down, hand tight. Hand tight, and you're finished. And that regulator's done.